Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. He pointed at me and said, "You are nothing special. A woman like you could never stand beside a man like me." The words came out of Derek Carmichael's mouth like he had been rehearsing them, loud and clear across the crowded bistro patio. People stared. The couple at the next table stopped eating. The waiter froze mid-step. Shame burned my skin, starting in my chest and spreading until I felt like I was on fire. For 3 years I had loved this man, adjusted my life around his schedule, his career, his expectations. And now he was pointing at me in front of his colleagues, telling everyone within earshot that I was not good enough to stand beside him. My throat tightened. My hands shook. Every instinct screamed at me to defend myself, to explain, to make them understand. Then something else rose up, something I had almost forgotten I possessed. My spine straightened. I felt strength I did not know I still had. I stood up, looked directly into his eyes, and said, "Thank you for showing me who you are." Then I picked up my purse and walked away, leaving his cruelty behind me like trash on that sunlit patio. That was 7 months ago. My name is Maya Holloway, and this is the story of what happened before and after that moment. I am 31 years old, and I do work most people do not know exists. Architectural restoration and historic preservation. Not the glossy home improvement version where everything gets painted white and called updated. The real thing. The kind where you spend weeks in dusty archives researching original construction methods, crawl through attics in July heat to study 1880s timber framing, and source materials that have not been manufactured since before the Great Depression. I earned my bachelor's degree in architecture from a state university I could afford with scholarships and restaurant jobs that left me smelling like fryer grease. Then I fought my way into a master's program in architectural history that accepts only 15 students a year. Portfolio reviews, written essays, interviews with preservation specialists who tried to scare away anyone not absolutely serious. Those 2 years were the hardest and best of my life. I learned to identify materials by sight and touch, to understand why buildings were designed in certain ways based on technology and regional traditions. Summers, I worked on restoration sites across the Northeast, learning from craftsmen in their 70s who had spent entire lives preserving techniques that would otherwise die with them. Men who could match any plaster composition by feel. Women who could identify wood species from a single grain pattern. My mother raised me alone after my father left when I was 6. I have 3 clear memories of him, and all of them involve doors closing. The front door when he said he was going to the store and disappeared for 3 weeks. The car door when he dropped me off early because he had plans. The courthouse door after the divorce, when he walked out without looking back. My mother never spoke badly about him. She did not need to. His absence spoke for itself. She worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Cleaned houses for wealthy families during the day. Waited tables at a diner at night where the tips were decent if you could tolerate businessmen who confused kindness with permission. I did homework in the back booth most nights. The smell of coffee and bacon grease soaked into my notebooks. From her I learned one lesson deeper than anything I ever read in a textbook. Never depend on anyone else for your survival. Not a man, not a boss, not anyone, she would say while scrubbing someone else's bathtub so I could have new school supplies. She said it while counting crumpled bills at the kitchen table after midnight shifts. She said it when the acceptance letter for my master's program arrived. Good. Now you will never have to clean anyone's house but your own. And if you ever do, it will be because you want to, not because you have to. Now I live in a renovated loft downtown. 900 square feet of brick walls. I inspected myself. Original hardwood floors from the 1920s that I researched and refinished to match the original finish as closely as modern materials allow. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlook the city. It is not huge, but it is mine. I drive a Honda Sport utility vehicle. I paid off 2 years early by taking extra consultations and living below my means. I have savings, a retirement account, and a life I built brick by brick. People rarely understand what I do until they see it. Last year, I led the restoration of an 1890s courthouse that had been falling apart for decades. We uncovered frescoes buried under layers of paint, rebuilt the copper dome using period-appropriate methods, and restored marble staircases worn down by salt and neglect. At the Preservation Awards ceremony, the mayor called our work a gift to future generations. That project alone brought in 6 new contracts. When I walk into a 130-year-old building, I do not just see walls and floors. I see stories. Craftsmen who hand-carved molding by lamplight. Families whose lives left scuff marks on baseboards and worn spots on stair treads. History that, once destroyed, is gone forever. I specialize in matching original materials down to microscopic details. Wood grain, plaster composition, pigments mixed according to historical formulas. I manage complex projects most people have no idea how to even begin. I met Derek 3 years ago at a charity gala in Boston, one of those black tie events where professionals network over wine that costs more per bottle than I used to make in a week. He was a corporate attorney at a major downtown firm, the kind that bills $600 an hour and measures success in billable hours and partnership tracks. That night, he seemed genuinely interested when I talked about a historic mansion I was restoring in Cambridge. He asked thoughtful questions about sourcing period materials and matching original finishes. "That is fascinating," he said. "Most people would not have the patience for that kind of detail." I thought it was a compliment. The first year was good. We spent weekends wandering salvage yards and antique shops. He came to gallery openings, attended preservation events, listened while I talked about projects with more enthusiasm than I could contain. He introduced me as my girlfriend, the architect, and I let the title slide. Looking back, I can see when things shifted. His questions changed from curious to quietly critical. "How much does restoration actually pay compared to new construction?" he would ask while scrolling through his phone. "Do you ever think about doing something more lucrative?" At firm events, when colleagues asked what I did, he would answer first. "Maya works with old buildings. Kind of like an interior designer, but for historic homes. Decorative. Secondary. Harmless." His parents made it worse. His father, a retired investment banker. His mother, the chair of several museum boards. They loved history as long as someone else did the labor. At family dinners, they asked about my plans, with a tone that implied my current work was temporary. Did I want to teach someday? Write coffee table books? Surely I did not plan to work in construction forever. The way his mother said construction, like she had bitten something sour, made my jaw clench every time. I responded by shrinking. I stopped talking about major contracts and exciting discoveries. I framed my days as small problems, minor setbacks. I invited him to fewer job sites after he joked about me playing in the dirt. I convinced myself his suggestions about real estate or development were supportive guidance instead of what they were. Contempt disguised as concern. I told myself that once I earned more awards, more press, he would finally see the value of what I did. I was wrong. 7 months ago, he called me on a Thursday morning while I was standing in the library of an 1880s estate in Brookline, examining water damage on a coffered ceiling. "Lunch tomorrow," he said. "Bistro Lauren. 1 o'clock. I wiped dust from my forehead. "Tomorrow? Derek, I have a historical commission meeting at 2. I cannot reschedule." His tone hardened. "This is important. 2 senior partners and their wives. It will be good for you to make connections. Good for me." As if my career depended on impressing his colleagues. Still, I heard something urgent in his voice and agreed. "I will move the meeting." He added, "Wear something nice. Not your work clothes," and hung up. The words lodged under my skin. Not your work clothes, as if evidence of my labor was shameful. As if dust and plaster made me less worthy of being seen beside him. Friday was hot and bright. I wore my navy dress, the one I saved for award ceremonies. The restaurant patio shimmered in the sun, white tablecloths and crystal glasses glowing. Derek sat at a center table with 4 others. 2 older men in expensive suits and 2 women in flawless designer dresses. "Everyone, this is my girlfriend, Maya Holloway," he said with formal politeness. "Maya, this is Gerald Robinson and his wife, Angela, and Leon Carter with his wife, Sonia. Gerald and Leon are senior partners at my firm. And this is Dr. Calvin Reeves, a trauma surgeon who is interviewing us to handle a malpractice case." We exchanged handshakes and pleasantries. After the wine arrived, the conversation drifted through vacations and firm gossip. Eventually, Angela turned to me. "So, Maya, what do you do?" The table quieted. I said what I always said. I specialize in historic building restoration. Right now, I am leading a restoration of an 1880s estate in Brookline. Her face brightened. "That sounds wonderful. My aunt's Victorian house is falling apart. Do you work with residential clients?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Derek cut in. "Maya is more of a hobbyist," he said, waving his hand. She does small restoration projects, but it is not really a full-time career path. We have been talking about her moving into something with more growth potential. Heat rushed to my face. Actually, I said, forcing my voice to stay level. The Brookline estate is a $2.3 million restoration, and I am the lead architect. Derek laughed. That soft, condescending sound I had learned to hate. You are part of a team. Let us not exaggerate your role. He had just implied, in front of his partners, that I was lying about my own work. Calvin spoke then, his voice calm. Historic preservation is complex work. It requires serious expertise. Derek's jaw tightened. You do not understand the field, he said. It is not as complex as you imagine. Then he turned his body toward me, eyes sharp. He raised his hand and pointed at my chest like he was making a closing argument. Let us be honest. You are nothing special, Maya. A woman like you could never stand beside a man like me. You work with dusty old buildings because you do not have the ambition for real success. You are content with little projects and pretending they matter. The patio went silent. Conversation stopped. The couple at the next table froze, forks suspended. A waiter stood 3 feet away holding a pitcher of water, eyes wide. Shame roared through me, hot and suffocating. 3 years of small cuts suddenly made sense. This was how he had always seen me. Insignificant, lesser, something to be tolerated until he decided he needed better. Underneath the shame, something older stirred. The part of me that had watched my father walk away and decided I would never rely on anyone like that again. The part that had scrubbed dishes after double shifts and still found the energy to study. The part that had stood on scaffolding in January wind to save a crumbling cornice. That part refused to bow to him now. I stood up slowly. My hand stopped shaking. I picked up my purse and looked him in the eye. Thank you for showing me who you are, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then I turned and walked away. I left the napkin on the chair, the untouched entree on the plate, the shocked faces, and Derek's pointing hand still raised in empty air. I made it to my car before the tears came, hot and furious. My phone buzzed in my purse. 3 missed calls from him, then a text. Maya, that was inappropriate. You embarrassed me in front of my colleagues. Another. We need to talk about your reaction. Walking out like that was childish and unprofessional. He had humiliated me in public and somehow still cast himself as the injured party. More messages came. You are being dramatic. I was making a point about career trajectory. You took it personally. Those people are important to my career. Do you understand what you just did? Not one hint of regret. Just criticism of my response to his cruelty. I blocked his number without replying. It felt like cutting a rope that had been slowly strangling me for 3 years. My friend Tiana called that night. Please tell me you finally left that man, she said as soon as I answered. I told her everything, from the lunch invitation to the way he had reduced my work to a hobby. She listened in silence. When I finished, she said, Good. I am glad it is over. He has been undermining you for years. You started talking about your projects like you were apologizing for them. That is not you. 2 days later, my mother called. I heard what happened, she said. Who told you? His mother called someone I used to work for. Word travels. I braced myself for disappointment. Instead, she said, Good for you for walking away. If he talks to you like that in public, he has been talking to you worse in private. I did not raise you to accept that. I reminded her she had once said he was stable and from a good family. She replied, I said that because I thought you were happy. You did not sound happy anymore. Work became my refuge. At the Brookline estate, I arrived before dawn and left after dark. The owner, Felicia Grant, often stopped by with lunch and questions. One afternoon, as we sat on the wide front porch eating sandwiches, she said, My sister sits on the board of the Historical Preservation Trust. They are looking for someone to lead a major project. I gave them your name. I nearly dropped my drink when she said the property, the Whitmore Mansion. The Whitmore Mansion was legendary in preservation circles, an 1870s Italianate estate that had been decaying for decades. Previous attempts at restoration had failed. 2 weeks later, I stood in a conference room before 6 members of the trust, including their director, Patricia Wells, presenting my plan. I outlined structural assessments, archival research, material sourcing, code compliance, timelines, and budgets. They asked hard questions. I answered every one. When I finished, Patricia looked around the table, then at me. When can you start? She asked. I left with a signed contract in my bag. A $4.5 million restoration. 2-year timeline. Full authority as lead restoration architect. Sitting in my car, I thought about Derek telling me I lacked ambition. Then I drove back to Brookline. There was work to do. The nightmares began a few weeks after the restaurant. In my dreams, I was back on that patio, frozen in my chair while Derek pointed at me and repeated, "You are nothing special," louder and louder as strangers laughed. Other nights, I was at the trust board meeting presenting the Whitmore project when he walked in, told them I had exaggerated my qualifications, and they tore up the contract. I would wake up shaking, heart pounding. One afternoon, Rachel Price, a woman from Derek's social circle, asked to meet for coffee. I almost declined, then agreed. She stirred her drink and said, "We all think he was out of line, but you know how much pressure he is under. He is up for junior partner. His parents have expectations." He snapped. If you had been more understanding about his stress, I doubt he would have reacted that way. The implication was clear. I set my cup down. So I should excuse public humiliation because he is stressed? I asked. "I am only saying there is context," she replied. "Maybe if you had been more supportive of his career needs." I stood, placed money on the table, and said, "I am going to walk away from anyone who thinks he humiliated me because I was not supportive enough." I left without looking back. On the drive home, I removed her number from my phone. A few weeks later, I ran into Derek's mother in the produce section of a grocery store. She blocked my path with her cart. "We need to talk," she said. "Derek has been devastated. Whatever he said at that lunch was taken out of context. He is a good man from a good family. At your age, Maya, women in your position do not have the luxury of being prideful. Women in my position. Not wealthy. Not connected. Not enough." I put the tomatoes back in their bin. "You are right," I said. "I do not have the luxury of settling for a man who does not respect me. I do not have the luxury of accepting public humiliation because he comes from a good family. I am grateful I figured that out now." Then I walked away, left my half-full cart, and drove home with my hands shaking from anger rather than shame. In late summer, the Boston Globe ran a full-page feature on the Whitmore Mansion restoration. They had interviewed me for 2 hours and actually listened. The article described my methods, praised the complexity of the project, and quoted Patricia calling me exactly the kind of expert this field needs. My inbox filled with inquiries from historical societies, museums, and architects. Around noon that day, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. "Maya, I saw the article. That is impressive. I have been thinking about what happened at lunch. I was under a lot of stress. Said things I did not mean. We should talk. You are clearly more ambitious than I realized. We could be good together now that you are at this level professionally." Derek had somehow gotten a new number for me. I read the messages carefully. He was not apologizing. He was revising. My worth had not changed. Only his perception of it had, now that my success was visible in a way that impressed him. I blocked the number and set my phone face down. This time I felt nothing but cold clarity. In October, I traveled to a historic preservation conference in Rhode Island. I had attended for years, but this was my first time presenting. The Whitmore project was now a case study. I spoke for 40 minutes about structural stabilization, material analysis, and balancing code requirements with authenticity. The questions afterward were technical and respectful. It felt like standing among peers, not defending my existence. At the reception, a voice behind me said, "That was an incredible presentation." I turned and recognized him immediately, Calvin, the trauma surgeon from the patio. He looked slightly awkward standing among architects, but his eyes were steady. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I should have done more that day." I told him honestly that he had not said those words and did not need to apologize for Derek. "Maybe not," he replied, "but I could have done more. I also came because I am renovating a Victorian brownstone and realized I know nothing about historic restoration. I would like to hire you for a consultation, if you are available." He handed me a card that read Calvin Reeves, Doctor of Medicine, Trauma Surgery, Massachusetts General Hospital. I told him I would think about it. A week later, I stood in his narrow South End brownstone, pointing out original details buried under bad 1990s updates. He followed with a notebook, taking real notes, asking careful questions. "You see things no one else sees," he said in the former library. "I walked through here a dozen times before buying it and missed almost everything you just showed me." Hearing my expertise treated as normal, valuable, and unquestioned made something inside me relax. Afterward, we had dinner at a small Italian restaurant around the corner. We talked about surgery and restoration, about holding fragile things and being responsible when they break. He told me about patients he had lost despite doing everything right. I told him about a collapsed building whose contractor ignored my warnings. We understood each other in a way that surprised me. When he walked me to my car, he said, "I would like to see you again. Not professionally. If and when you are ready." I told him I would need time. He said he was patient. The Whitmore project accelerated. Local news covered the restoration. Preservation journals requested articles. I realized I could not manage everything alone. I formed a firm, Holloway Restoration Architecture. I hired 3 junior architects I had mentored, a historian, and an office manager. We rented space in a converted factory building with exposed brick and timber beams. Within weeks, we had multiple active projects and a growing wait list. During this time, Calvin and I had coffee regularly and occasional dinners. He never rushed me, never pushed, never made my healing process about himself. He showed up when he said he would. He listened when I talked about nightmares and old wounds, and he treated my work with consistent respect. The difference between his quiet support and Derek's constant undermining could not have been sharper. One afternoon, my assistant buzzed me. "Someone is here to see you," she said. "He says it is urgent." I assumed it was a client. Instead, Derek walked into my office like he still belonged in my life. He looked thinner, his suit rumpled, but his eyes carried the same entitlement. "You have been ignoring my messages," he said. "I came to apologize. But you have to admit you are not innocent. You always talked about your work like it was small. How was I supposed to take you seriously?" I stared at him. Years of belittling, reframed as my fault. "You need to leave," I said. "Now." He frowned. "You are making a mistake. Women like you do not get many chances with men like me." There it was again. Women like you. Men like me. "If you ever show up here again," I replied, "I will have building security escort you out." He held my gaze for a long second, then turned and left. I sat down and trembled, not from doubt, but from rage that he was still trying to rewrite what happened. That evening I called Calvin from my office. "He came to my workplace today," I said. Hospital noises murmured in the background. "Are you safe?" he asked immediately. "Do you need me there?" "I am safe. It just rattled me." "That is understandable," he said. "He is trying to make himself the victim because you refuse to accept his version of events. Setting boundaries and enforcing them is strength, Maya." 6 weeks later, the Historical Preservation Trust held its annual gala in a restored 1920s ballroom downtown, a project I had consulted on years earlier. My friend Tiana flew in for it. "You are going," she insisted. "You're going to wear something that makes you feel powerful and walk in there as the woman you actually are, not as the version he tried to shrink." Calvin asked if he could accompany me as my date. I said yes. My mother helped me choose a deep emerald dress with clean lines that made me feel grounded and strong. When Calvin arrived, his eyes softened. "You look incredible," he said simply. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, marble columns, original flooring gleaming. I was greeting colleagues near the entrance when I saw Derek across the room, standing by the bar with a young woman at his side. Our eyes met. Calvin's hand settled at the small of my back. Derek walked toward us, pulling his date along. "Maya," he said with false warmth, "I did not expect to see you here." "I consulted on this building's restoration," I replied. "The trust invited me." His smile tightened. "Of course. Your little building projects." Calvin stepped closer. "Dr. Calvin Reeves," he said, extending his hand. "Trauma surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital." Recognition flickered across Derek's face. "The surgeon from Bistro Lauren," he said. "I remember you. You had opinions about my relationship." "I had opinions about your behavior," Calvin replied evenly. Conversations around us had started to slow. People were watching. I tried to leave. Derek caught my forearm, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to stop me. Calvin moved instantly. I pulled my arm free on my own. "We are finished talking," I said quietly. Derek's face reddened. "You think you are better than me now?" he snapped louder. "Because you got some articles and attention? You are still the same woman who worked on dusty old buildings while I built a real career. You are still nobody special." Something in me locked into place. Months of therapy, work, and reflection lined up behind my spine. "You are right," I said, my voice clear enough to carry. "I am the same woman. The woman who spent 12 years becoming an expert in her field. The woman who leads multi-million-dollar restoration projects. The woman whose work allows buildings like this one to stand for another 100 years. The room had gone almost silent. I was always that woman, I continued. You simply refused to see it because you were too busy measuring my worth by whether it impressed your colleagues or made you look good. I build things that last. You tear people down to feel important. I preserve beauty. You try to destroy it. His date had stepped away from him. Several nearby faces showed open disgust. I looked him in the eye. You once told me that a woman like me could never stand beside a man like you. You were absolutely right. Thank God I finally believed you. Then I turned and walked away, Calvin at my side, out onto the balcony overlooking the garden. Cool air washed over my skin. My hands shook with adrenaline, but there was no shame in it this time. Only release. That, Calvin said quietly, was one of the most powerful things I have ever seen. I did not mean to make a scene, I replied. I just could not let him own the narrative again. You did not make a scene, he said. You told the truth, and you did it with more composure than he has ever had. He paused. I told you I was patient. I have watched you rebuild yourself piece by piece. I see you, Maya. Your work, your strength, your heart. I would like to be in your life, truly, if you want that. I looked at him, a man who had seen me at my lowest, who had never used my vulnerability against me, who respected what I did without needing to translate it into his language. I do, I said. He took my hand. For the first time in months, I felt completely aligned with my own life. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages. Someone had recorded the confrontation on their phone. The video was circulating in preservation and legal circles. The director of the trust, Patricia Wells, called to check on me. You did not hurt the trust, she said when I apologized for the scene. If anything, donors gave more. People admire courage and clarity. I admire it. In the months that followed, Holloway Restoration Architecture expanded again. More clients, more staff, more projects. We won a contract to restore an entire historic district downtown. 15 buildings over 3 city blocks. A 3-year, $12 million project that would transform the firm into something that would keep working long after I step back someday. The Whitmore Mansion's ribbon cutting took place on a clear October afternoon. The mayor spoke about legacy. Patricia spoke about standards. Then she called me to the podium. I kept my remarks brief and focused on the building, the craftsmen, the research, the responsibility of stewardship. In the audience, my mother sat near the front, back straight, eyes bright. When I stepped down, she hugged me. Your father leaving did not stop you, she said quietly. I am glad you never let anyone else stop you either. Calvin proposed in an 1890s estate in the Berkshires while I was assessing stained glass windows. He waited until I finished explaining why the glass needed conservation, then said, I love watching the way you care about things that most people overlook. I want to be the man who helps protect what you build. He opened a small box with an antique Art Deco ring, sapphires and diamonds in a geometric pattern. Thought you would want something with history, he said. I said yes before he could finish asking. His family welcomed me completely. His sister, an aerospace engineer, asked about load-bearing walls and foundation calculations at family dinners. His parents, both retired teachers, came to the reopening of a theater I restored in Cambridge and listened to every technical detail. This is remarkable work, his father said afterward, resting a hand on my shoulder. You should be incredibly proud. Through Preservation Networks, I heard pieces of Derek's story. He had left his big firm. The public explanation was pursuing other opportunities. Quietly, people mentioned internal complaints about his treatment of junior staff and support workers, emboldened after the gala incident. He had taken a job at a smaller firm with less prestige. He was dating someone from their marketing department. When Tiana saw them at an industry event, she told me the woman looked exhausted. Margaret, the wife of senior partner Gerald Robinson, asked to meet me once more. Over coffee, she said, after you walked away at the gala, several people in his old office finally spoke up about how he treated them. What you did gave them language and courage. You did not ruin his career, Maya. He did that himself. You just refused to keep covering for him. I sat with that for a long time after she left. Our wedding is scheduled for early spring at a restored 1920s estate my firm completed last year. A small ceremony, 50 people at most. My mother will walk me down the aisle. Tiana will stand beside me. We are honeymooning with a 2-week trip through American cities whose historic architecture I have studied but never seen in person. Charleston's row houses, Savannah's squares, New Orleans's Creole townhouses, and the preservation districts of Philadelphia. The business continues to grow, but that is not the only measure of success. Real success is waking up excited to walk into a building that has survived a century and figuring out how to help it survive another. It is mentoring young Black architects who thought this field did not have room for them and watching them claim space. It is coming home to someone who asks, "How was your site visit?" and actually wants the detailed answer. Sometimes late at night, I still remember Derek's finger pointed at my chest on that patio. But the memory no longer brings heat to my face. It brings a strange kind of gratitude. That moment stripped away every illusion I had about him. His cruelty forced me to choose myself clearly and completely. It pushed me through a door I had been too afraid to open. On the other side of that door were the projects I was meant to lead, the firm I was meant to build, the partner who sees me clearly, the life I was always capable of creating. That day on the patio, he told me, "A woman like you could never stand beside a man like me." He was right. A woman like me builds foundations that last. A man like him does not deserve to stand there. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.